Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe. I'd really love that. If you're returning, how are you today? Well, in this video, this is the second part to the crisis in Venezuela, okay? So, where we left off was they were talking about the freedom of expression, okay, and things of that sort, and what happens to journalists, okay. Now, government measures, okay, to restrict international funding of NGOs and of unsubstantiated accusations that rights defenders undermine Venezuelan democracy, create a hostile environment, limiting groups' ability to defend human rights. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled that individuals or organizations receiving foreign funding can be prosecuted for treason, and the National Assembly prohibited international assistance to organizations that defend political rights or monitor the performance of public bodies. On May 3rd, the NGO Provea, and that's Provea, called on authorities to respect the rights of 13 individuals, including 2 former U.S. soldiers detained during an alleged invasion attempt. Maduro accused Provea of receiving money from the CIA and of defending the rights of terrorists and mercenaries. Authorities have cracked down on human rights lawyers supporting demonstrators. In March, the National Guard detained lawyer Henderson Maldonado during a demonstration by renal and cancer patients. An agent hit him on the head and hand with a frozen water bottle, telling him he did not deserve to live. Charged with resisting authority and inciting criminal activity, Maldonado was released on condition that he report to court every 30 days. Citizens and NGOs have credibly accused a government program that distributes food and basic goods at capped prices of discriminating against government critics. Previously, people supporting referenda that could have ended the Maduro or Chavez presidencies were fired from government jobs. Corruption, weak security, deteriorating infrastructure, overcrowding, insufficient staffing, poorly trained guards allowed armed gangs effectively to control detainees. Excessive use of pretrial detention contributes to overcrowding. There have been reports of Rona outbreaks and deaths due to health reasons in several Venezuelan prisons. In May, an uprising of Los Llanos prison in Portuguesa state, protesting guards withholding of food brought by families which prisoners relied on, resulted in 47 deaths and 75 injuries, the NGO Venezuelan Observatory of Prisons reported. Now, in September, the independent international fact-finding mission created by the UN Human Rights Council to investigate allegations of atrocities since 2014 concluded that there were reasonable grounds to believe that pro-government groups and high-level authorities, including Maduro, had committed violations amounting to crimes against humanity, including extrajudicial executions, politically motivated detention and torture, and abuses against protesters. The mission found the judiciary contributed to arbitrary arrest, impunity for egregious abuses, and denial of justice to victims. In October, after the report released, the Council adopted a new resolution extending the fact-finding mission's mandate for 2 years. The Council also adopted a separate resolution presented by Iran to continue UN technical cooperation on human rights with Venezuelan authorities under Maduro. OHCHR continued to monitor the situation in Venezuela. It maintains an in-country presence and has provided regular oral updates to the UN Human Rights Council in 2020 describing ongoing abuses, such as arbitrary arrest, torture, and forced disappearances, as well as a dire humanitarian situation. In July, it reported on lack of judicial independence in Venezuela and abuses committed in the Orinoco mining arc as mandated by the Council. In 2018, International Criminal Court ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda announced a preliminary examination to analyze whether since at least 2017, crimes occurring within the court's jurisdiction have taken place, including allegations of use of excessive force against demonstrators and detention of thousands of individuals, a number of whom are alleged to have suffered serious abuses in detention. 6 countries, all ICC member states, subsequently requested an ICC investigation, and 3 other countries have since expressed support for the state's referral. In February, the Maduro government asked the Office of the Prosecutor to investigate possible crimes against humanity caused by the application of all unlawful coercive measures adopted unilaterally by the U.S. government. In 2020, representatives from Latin American countries hosting most Venezuelans who have fled met as part of the Quito process, and that's QUITO, created in 2018 to chart a common response to the Venezuelan exodus. In a meeting in October, participating foreign ministers committed themselves to strengthening international cooperation to address Venezuelans' migration and humanitarian crisis. Several governments have imposed targeted sanctions on Venezuelan officials implicated in human rights abuses and corruption. The United States has sanctioned more than 150 and canceled the visas of 1,000. In June, the European Union and Switzerland imposed sanctions on 11 officials for their role in acts undermining democracy and the rule of law, bringing the number of sanctioned Venezuelans to 36. Some Latin American governments have also prohibited Venezuelan officials from entering their country. Besides adopting targeted sanctions, the EU has consistently condemned abuses by the Venezuelan government and played a leading role in the International Contact Group to support ongoing efforts to find a political solution to the Venezuelan crisis and lay the groundwork for credible elections. In December, it concluded that elections to the National Assembly had failed to comply with minimum international standards for a credible, inclusive, and transparent process, and refused to recognize the results. In May, the EU and Spain co-hosted the International Donors Conference, which raised over $2.5 billion, 2.9 billion US dollars, to support Venezuelan refugees and migrants in the region. And the European Parliament adopted 2 resolutions on Venezuela, focusing both on the political and the humanitarian crisis. Now, since 2017, the U.S. has imposed financial sanctions, including a ban on dealing in new stocks and bonds issued by the Venezuelan government and its state oil company. Despite a humanitarian exception, these sanctions could exacerbate the already dire humanitarian situation in Venezuela, both due to the risk of overcompliance and because the sanctions reduce the resources available to the government to address the crisis. The extent to which the sanctions are in fact having this impact and whether the government would have used any additional resources to help its people is unclear. An estimated 7 million people needed humanitarian assistance in 2020. The UN Humanitarian Response Plan for Venezuela noted this, and the plan calls for $762.5 million to assist 4.5 million of the most vulnerable Venezuelans, including $87.9 million to address the health and socioeconomic impact of Rona. As of November 2nd, more than $132 million had been disbursed. And from January through May, 2.1 million people received assistance. As a member of the UN Human Rights Council, Venezuela votes regularly to prevent scrutiny of human rights violations, including in Syria, Yemen, Myanmar, Belarus, Burundi, Eritrea, and Iran. Venezuela withdrew from the American Convention on Human Rights in 2013, leaving citizens and residents unable to request intervention by the Inter-American Court on Human Rights when local remedies for abuses were ineffective or unavailable. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights continues to monitor Venezuela, applying the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, which is not subject to states' ratification. Oh my God. I am just knowing that that stuff even happens there is mind-blowing. And then I found this, okay? So I'm sure you guys have heard about this, but I'm not sure because I found out about it, okay? So to fathom the magnitude of Venezuela's financial collapse, okay, after I just read to you everything I just read to you, okay, travel southeast from Caracas, past the oil fields and over the Orinoco River, and head deep into the savannah that blankets one of the most remote corners of the country, okay? There in the barber shops and restaurants, hotels that constitute the main strip of one dusty little outpost after another, you'll find prices displayed in grams of gold. A one-night stay in a hotel, half a gram. Lunch for two at a Chinese restaurant, quarter of a gram. Haircut, eighth of a gram. Now, Jorge Pena, he's 20 years old, figured that eighth came to 3 small flakes, the equivalent of $5. After getting a trim one recent weekday in the town of Tumeremo, Tumeremo, he handed them over to his barber, who, satisfied with Pena's calculation, quickly pocketed them. You can pay for everything with gold, he says. In the high-tech global economy of the 21st century, where tap-and-go transactions are the rage, this is about as low-tech as it gets. Most of the world moved on from gold as a medium of exchange over a century ago. Its resurfacing in Venezuela today is the most extreme manifestation of the repudiation of the local currency, the bolivar, that has swept the country. After years of meddling in the economy by Nicolas Maduro's socialist regime, the bolivar has been rendered almost worthless by hyperinflation. In its place, the dollar has become the de facto choice in Caracas and other major cities. Along the western border with Colombia, the peso is the dominant currency. It's used in more than 90% of transactions in the biggest city in the region, San Cristobal, according to the research a research firm called Eco Analytica. Down on the southern border with Brazil, the real is often the currency of choice. And the euro and cryptocurrencies have their niche in parts of the country as well. People simply stopped trusting the bolivar. It no longer fulfilled its function as a store of wealth or means of accounting or a medium of exchange. Today, only the poorest Venezuelans, those who lack access to dollars or other currencies, still use bolivars, and people prefer any currency over the bolivar. In parts of southeast Venezuela, that currency is gold. The land there, a stunning world of tabletop mountains and giant waterfalls that cascade into lush valleys, is loaded with the precious metal. The temptation of overnight wealth has lured generations of wannabe miners, searing the names of the region's towns, El Callao and Gusipati, into Venezuelan folklore. The area is a violent, lawless place today, overrun by gangs and guerrillas, shootouts with Maduro's soldiers who control many of the bigger mines are common. And yet, Venezuelans still come from all over, driven by a dearth of steady work after the decade-long economic depression. The small-time operators of illegal mines typically pay day laborers in nuggets. So there's plenty of bullion to be had. That steady supply, coupled with internet reception that's so shoddy that digital transactions are nearly impossible, makes the gold the least bad option for locals. They use hand tools to break shards of nuggets and then carry them in their pockets, often wrapped in bolivar bills, one of the few remaining uses for currency. Stores have small scales, but some shopkeepers and consumers feel so comfortable handling the metal at this point that they evaluate the flakes by sight. To the uninitiated outsider, this sounds wild, and it does, to you and I. Can you imagine? When's the last time you had a haircut? How'd you pay? With your debit card, your credit card, or cash? These people are paying with gold. Imagine that. How can authenticity and weight possibly be determined by a mere glance for someone untrained in the ways of mineralogy? Gold experts, though, back in what the locals say, you just get a feel for it over time. Gold is an element. Unlike diamonds, which are hard to evaluate, gold has characteristics. And there are specific things you can look for, especially in smaller pieces. The use of gold is slowly expanding into nearby cities, including Ciudad Bolivar, the state capital nestled along the banks of the Orinoco. Miners regularly traveled there to sell their bullion when they went to cash out. Stores and shopping malls exchange it for dollars. But back in the mining towns, there's little need to carry anything other than gold. The owner of a small hotel in town, he'd only give his first name, Omar, out of concern for his safety. Says he pays his staff with gold, using the flakes he is handed out by customers. He charges half a gram for a night in a room. About 2/3 of customers pay with gold. Omar says. He'll also take dollars and other foreign currencies from those who don't have gold on them. And what about bolivars? By law, he can't say no. So he takes them reluctantly, he says, and then unloads them fast. Is it coming here? Answer honestly, in your opinion. All right, guys, I love you. I'll see you in the next one. You stay safe, you stay positive, you keep prepping. Because you just never know, do you? Fearless.